Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Love Fruit podcast. And my guests today were actually unknown to me until a couple of weeks ago. And we do a little group on a Friday night, Fruity Fridays. And this couple joined, and they just exuded, this life force, health, energy at us through the Zoom screen. And they told us about an amazing story about their family and everything, and we'll get into that today. So I'm here with Layla and Patrick McGinnis, who I believe living in Hawaii at the moment. And very interesting, Patrick was a professional soccer player. Layla is an author. So we're going to find out more about all that. And I should just mention the Fruit Festival in the UK. If you're here in the UK or interested, you can find out more at fruitfest.co.uk if you want to find out more about the festival. And you can specifically go to fruitfest.co.uk/registration if you want to find out about signing up for this year's event from the 29th of July to the 6th of August. We thank you for your support and for listening. And hello, guys. Is there anything you would like to say about yourself, to introduce yourself?
Hey, Ronnie.
Oh, we're just happy to be here and share what we can to support the message, and yeah, we're grateful to be here with you for sure.
Yeah, we had a great. I loved the night we had, the Fruity Fridays, when you were talking a lot about one of your pregnancies and one of the births you had, which was great. But before we get into that, maybe you can both tell us a little bit about your own personal story, because sometimes we like to ask people, what was your background? How did you grow up? What was your journey towards better health, raw vegan diet, and all that kind of stuff? Maybe Layla, you can go first and tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I grew up actually spending about half of my childhood in the hospital or in doctor's offices. I was a very, very sickly young girl. I had all kinds of major illnesses and diseases, which a lot of people that come to this lifestyle have had. So eczema and asthma, and then it kind of developed into further complications as I got into my teens, where I had some multiple major organs removed, gallbladder surgery, appendix taken out, and more things that occurred. And I was surprised as I got older that the doctors were just so confused as to why I was experiencing the things that I experienced, and they couldn't find a cause. And I just really felt like something was wrong with me, and I felt very disempowered and helpless. And it was a really difficult way to live. But deep inside of me, I knew that there was a different world that could exist. I knew that there were the answers to all of my questions, and I knew that my life could be healthy and that I could be strong and that I really could kind of come out of this sickly, miserable life. And a lot of it had to do with really differentiating from my family, to the degree where I think when I was about 16, I learned through some Peta articles about what was going on. And because of my love for animals, I just turned vegan overnight. And then with different health things that had been going on, I realized that it was kind of correlated with the journey toward greater health. And so I felt really grateful to find a path that kind of, brought awareness to something I was doing that I wasn't aware of, and also that was more in alignment with my integrity and my desires for greater health. And so over the years after that, I found out about raw foodism. And although I did have a period when I went to graduate school to study psychotherapy, where I was friends with a medical student who told me that they really thought that I needed to be eating meat because of what I had been doing, and my muscle was eating away at itself. And because I was kind of misinformed and about the academic portion of what I was doing with veganism, I really kind of fell into those traps. I knew I wanted to become a mother and I wanted to be healthy, and And so I did go back to some of my old ways for a period of maybe 3 or 4 years. I had my first pregnancy, and we did all of our pregnancies and our childbirths completely on our own without any medical professions or midwives or doulas or any other guidance other than our own intuition. We are homesteading, and we can talk more about that later. But I was not vegan for my first pregnancy, but we did have an amazing free birth. But for my second birth and pregnancy, every day I would wake up during my pregnancy and I'd be asking, what do I need to eat today? What do I need to do today? What do I need to believe today in order to have the most fulfilling childbirthing experience? And I was amazed that through these questions and this prayer and meditation every day that I kept hearing raw foods, raw foods. And once we did a lot of research, Patrick came across the 80-10-10 lifestyle, and we just said about halfway through the pregnancy, let's give this a go. We know that we can feel better, that we can have clearer minds, that we can be happier, and we really felt like this was the way to it. And it totally was. It was the most amazing pregnancy, and the childbirth was spectacular, which maybe you want to go into at another time. But after the childbirth happened, I knew that this was the diet for my life. If I wanted to live a happy, healthy, amazing life, that this was going to be a big part of it, the high fruit lifestyle. And I've just been blown away, getting happier, healthier, stronger every day. And I'm just a completely different person than I was when I was a child. And so I feel so grateful. And it's such a wonderful opportunity to share with people like yourself, Ronnie, who are so beautifully bringing together people across the globe who are, have an affinity for this lifestyle. And so, yeah, thank you so much for thinking of this. And I think that's all I'll share for now.
Awesome. Look, before we get into your story, Patrick, let me just ask you a couple of questions there, because that's really, you're saying you had your gallbladder removed and your appendix removed, like really young. That seems unusual to me, but were you quite sick then? Is that what the case was?
I was. Every single time I ate, I would have this horrible pain in my stomach. And this was around like maybe when I was 11 years old, 12 years old. We had a lot of stuff going on in my family too that was really devastating. And so I think that kind of had a role to play as well, kind of like the emotional, mental, spiritual aspect. But of course, the dietary was a huge piece of it. Every single time I would eat, I would just be healed over in pain for an hour sometimes, and nobody knew what was wrong. And so, unfortunately, I didn't have doctors that were kind of curious about what are you eating? What are the things you're putting in? What's going on with your entire system and the lymphatic system and so it was kind of a quick solution. They thought we'll just take out the gallbladder because it's functioning less than optimally. And so that was the course it took. And unfortunately, I didn't really know that I had a choice at that age. So I just went along with it because I thought it would make me feel better.
Did they personally offer you any alternative? Were you offered like you should change your diet, anything like that? Any advice at the time?
No, unfortunately, I didn't even know about alternative medicine until I was in my early 20s. I since then have, come to acupuncture, have come to some other types of healing, Reiki and massage at different times. But even those things feel like they're a complement to the diet and to the lifestyle. But if you really hone in and perfect the diet, I don't even really feel like those things are necessary. And that's kind of been proven to us at this point.
But for whatever reason, it seems like the way we both grew up, that wasn't part of the culture. Suburban America didn't even think about that unless you were like a hippie or some fringe character. It was like, no, you don't feel good, you take this or that thing from over the counter, and if it gets worse, then you go see somebody, and if it gets worse, then you're at that process. But yeah, they loved us. Our parents loved us very much, but they for whatever reason, none of us thought to ask those questions of like, oh, maybe what you just put in there has something to do with the way you feel.
The only reason I brought this up is, interestingly enough, my brother's wife recently had a gallbladder issue, and she was actually told that she could either get the operation or she could change her diet, which is very interesting to me that she was given that option. I think they actually told her to give up red meat and give up dairy and a few other things, and she's actually done it, and I think she's doing quite well. So something's maybe changing now. I don't know. I was very amazed to hear that, but that's quite good. Patrick, were you brought up like standard American diet, or how did it go for you?
Yeah, exactly. It was pretty standard, but even within the standard, we thought we were eating pretty healthy. I mean, my parents wanted the best, and they would, buy what they thought were the healthy options, which in that case was like the pizza with a few more vegetables on it, or, have a salad with dinner, or, whatever it might be. But it was still within that understanding, which wouldn't really think that health necessarily had everything or so much to do with the diet.
Yeah.
It was more like they had some good, good advice growing up, like exercising and looking after your body and being a nice person and things like that. But it wasn't to the point where they could associate less than ideal physical conditions to, big dietary choices, or seeing like the health effects of eating meat or in large amounts and things like that. So they wanted the best, but it's still that like a few of the pieces didn't connect in the way that they do more mainstream today.
Yeah, and when did you? I mean, you became a professional soccer player. So when did that start? Were you playing very young? Was your family kind of sport? You kind of mentioned they encouraged you to exercise. So what was that?
Yeah,
How did that all happen?
we were really pretty involved with the sports, and it just ended up soccer, pulled me in a little bit, and I really enjoyed that. But for sure, I think that tied in too with my interests in health, because you want to be the best you can be, and it's like, okay, how can I get an advantage? A huge advantage was looking after your health, and for whatever reason, during that time, a lot of the information there was some of the high protein, eat your meat and lift weights and that kind of approach, and I guess in some ways that did get some benefits for the short term, but as that was sustained over a longer period, I started to really see like, oh, I thought I was doing it right, but it clearly I wasn't getting the best information, because it wasn't something I could sustain, and it wasn't like, I mean, it would be really stimulating when you have a lot of that meat, and kind of like feel powerful and aggressive and angry, and like in some way that does help your sports performance. But then like doing that over years and years, you're like, oh, I can't play sports anymore. Look at this growth, and like all these or the recovery, all the undesirable things that, I mean, even at that time, I didn't realize this now until I look back at those years and say, oh, maybe my soreness wasn't because I was training so hard. My soreness was just because I was making bad choices,
So during your career playing soccer, were you given any specific like nutrition advice? I know that there's some clubs that they do try and limit certain things that players are eating, and I know that some clubs, they're very strict on weight. They get the players to weigh themselves all the time and stuff like that.
Yeah, for whatever reason, when I was there, nutrition was encouraged, but there wasn't somebody saying, don't eat this or don't eat that. It was more like, oh, make sure you get your Gatorade, get plenty of Gatorade in, and don't eat too soon before the match, and drink milk after the game. Like I silly things that wasn't, not like today, where it's like actually a vocation for a lot of the clubs to have somebody doing that. It was more like get your fruits and veggies 5 a day, kind of just standard American health information. And
were you always eating meat? You were never vegan as a when you were playing sports?
No, I was never vegan. That just never entered my mind, because it was so ingrained that the meat was the powerful component. The proteins and the animal foods were the strength giving components. That's just how we grew up, even outside of sports, everybody knows that milk makes you strong and meat is like what you're eating at night. And the more of it, the stronger you get. I mean, not everybody believed that, but my little bubble, what I had surrounded myself with, thought that. And so that was really interesting to see how those beliefs informed my choices, and then to see how that's all of a sudden stopped working, and I had to stop being athletic just because it was too painful. I had to stop doing all these things I love just because my body was screaming. And over the course of this journey that we've been on together, I've slowly been able to connect a few of the dots. I mean, we're still always learning, but we're just so grateful to have found this information, because it's just brought so many amazing changes to our life, to our bodies, and to our daily life. And like Layla said, we just appreciate the work that you and the others do around it in terms of spreading the message. Because it's funny, you mentioned we didn't really know each other until this last week, but we've been not active with the community, but we've been getting, you know, Ronnie's stuff every few weeks on the email, and we see the features that you do, whether it's you or people in other countries, and just kind of like learning and getting that confirmation of like, oh, this actually is an option for people. This we don't have to believe the you know, all the things that we grew up believing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, but it's really great that the people are starting to, you know, come together a bit more in little groups and all that. That's what I really love, trying to help that happen. But what I find interesting, you talking about there, like the idea that at the end of your career, like your body, like you basically almost, I don't want to say you can't play anymore, but maybe you couldn't play to the same level. And I've heard that a lot with athletes, and I don't know if that's partly to do with how much they play and then play when they're in pain and injured and all that stuff, and how much that is connected with diet also breaking their body down at the same time. And I just want to see more people, you know, more people on raw vegan diets and sports and stuff, and see how much farther they can last.
Yeah,
Interesting
absolutely.
to see.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because there's so much information out there, especially in the sports culture, about what to be taking in. And then, you know, obviously, especially with some of the stimulants and you know, chemical stimulants, or just stimulants in the food that sort of give these little effects that help you in sports, but then might not be so ideal, you know, after the game. It's sort of that. And then, like you say, then you try to cover that up with some other stimulant or drug or food or whatever it might be, and then it's just almost just too many moving parts. It's even hard to make understanding about. So yeah, it would be neat to see more of the information get to, you know, it already is. I mean, so many of these high performance athletes that are so inspiring to us, that really helped us start believing in this lifestyle. I mean, we're really grateful for those people that you know, the long distance runners, or the whoever it might be, that's, you know, spreading the fruit message. Is like, wow, yeah, you can be performing and it can be enjoyable, rather than sort of like this hardcore athlete that's, you know, performing well, but there's a lot of just like self-hatred and covering up of the undesirable effects until their career's over, and then they just become a mess.
Very cool. Well, let's get more into the diet and everything. One quick question before we get into all that. Did you play with or against any famous players that we'd all know, or what? I'm trying to figure out the level your career was at, or where you were playing and everything. And
yeah, well, I got, after playing in university, I got drafted by Kansas City at the time. They have a different name now, but it was in Kansas City, and some of the bigger names there were a guy named Preki. He's a pretty famous American soccer player, and also another World Cup player on our team was Josh Wolf, and Jimmy Conrad were kind of some of the bigger, more known players there. And it was interesting because I didn't connect the dots until long after, but it's funny looking back. Preki was always the one like eating fruit
Oh,
after the and stuff, and nobody was even saying why or even thought about it at the time. But when I think back, it's like, oh, okay, that's starting to make sense.
that's interesting.
But,
Yeah,
yeah.
there was a player from England from years ago. His name will come back to me in a moment, but he was like, I'm talking the 1950s, maybe the 1940s, like a player from way back. But his career lasted till he was like 50, literally 50 years old. And I thought, this guy must have been doing something totally different. And when I started to investigate, he was basically vegetarian. He would do fasts. He was doing like, I think he had like vegetable juice every day. Like he did all this stuff way back then, you know. So it's some people figure it out and manage to like extend their career, I suppose. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but he was like iconic player in England.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's even interesting to see that in the mainstream now. I mean, we don't get the whole story, but even little, snippets like, oh, Messi and Ronaldo are being encouraged to eat more vegetables and fruit. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how much truth there is in it, but at least it's part of the conversation,
For sure. So
Yeah.
how did you guys meet each other? And Layla, you were a vegan at the time when you met, I think, or what
Well,
exactly?
actually, I was in graduate school in Boulder, actually, and that was when I had gotten my message from this friend about that I needed to incorporate more meat, and I tried to, I mean, it was so distasteful to me because I had been away from it for so long that I really did not enjoy the process. So it was very limited, but I then when I left school, I always felt like when I was in these transitional times and when I didn't really know what direction my life was taking or what I was going to do or what I wanted to become, I always felt drawn to eating raw foods because I felt like it gave me the clarity that I wanted. It gave me the mental happiness and a certain degree of freedom to be able to kind of move beyond these limitations and these fears that I would almost immediately feel as soon as I incorporated cooked food again. And so it's really kind of a fascinating dance with that, where I would almost, even though I was still starting to incorporate more animal products during that time, I still knew that this was a tool that I could use at any time. And I didn't realize that it could become such a prominent part of my life, but I kind of always dreamed that it would. And I kind of always dreamed that I would be able to meet somebody that would be a raw foodist and it just so happened that when we met, we were both kind of, I don't even know if I would have met him actually, to be honest, if I wasn't kind of into the meat thing, because we were really kind of big on homesteading and doing all of our stuff on our own. We went through a period when we met where we were, we had our own goats for milking, and we just were kind of, had our own
Oh, wow.
chickens and doing everything on our own. And we also, for this period of like 7 years, although that whole period we weren't, eating meat or non-vegan, but we were cooking like only with fire and doing everything from a very rootsy place, growing all our own vegetables and a lot of our own fruits. And so we kind of got to experience what it was like to be completely self-sufficient on an omnivorous diet. And it was a lot of work, and just so much work, to the degree where, when we were like, we're finally living this dream of, really providing for ourselves, and we have it all lined up, but like we didn't feel as good as we knew we could feel, and our state of mind wasn't as good as we knew it could be. And so that really opened our eyes, and our curiosity really led us to kind of explore, like, maybe we're not quite doing this the sustainability thing quite right. Maybe there's a different way we could do it, where we would be happier and we would feel better, and there wouldn't be so much guilt for working with these animals, and all these things that just didn't quite feel in alignment with integrity, but were somehow aligned with some concepts and beliefs that were still lingering in our minds.
Were you
And so,
guys were you able to like make produce most of your food yourself at that point? Were you?
yeah,
How did that look like? What did that look like? Sorry.
Yeah.
well, I mean,
Go ahead.
do you want to
Eggs
share
and
first?
milk, and did you have
Yeah,
vegetables and
We grew a lot of
we-
bread?
taro.
Oh, taro.
well, I should say that we went through different periods. So like when we were living on the mainland United States, we were, you know, up high in the mountains. And so that was like a seasonal thing of, we would grow our own wheat and grow our own peas and beans and dry that and then grind our bread with the hand mill and then
Oh,
bake
wow.
a sour bread loaf and then have that with eggs from the chickens and milk from the goats and cheese from the neighbor, and then we'd have the dried vegetables from that winter and the pumpkins that were in the root cellar and kind of the North American high mountain version of
Right.
that. But then our life, we were living in a totally different place. We were in the tropics and we had coconuts and we'd be making breadfruit. We would do, you know, taro and breadfruit, kind of like trying to relive the old Hawaiian
Right.
tradition. And that was more fruit based and vegetables year round. And we let go of, we didn't do the goats, but we just had chickens. But we did a lot of cooking, and it was like that was the basis. And like Layla said, we were trying to follow this idea we had of health and saying, going back to the land, it's going to be healthy, and going to traditional diets is going to be healthy. I mean, traditional in the last whatever how many generations, but we thought those things were going to be healthy. And then it was this eye-opening experience to actually be doing it after years of preparation, to like immerse ourselves in this old way of living. And we got there, and our bodies, or I'll speak for myself, I just totally got destroyed. I mean, it just destroyed.
Really?
Yeah, like.
But even though there was no processed food and it was all natural, all organic and everything, it wasn't working for you?
It was not working for me, Ronnie. And I don't know why. It just felt like almost like the inevitable tug in this direction. And that's why I mean, we're still learning, but at the same time, it's been almost like we thought that was going to be such a great idea. And then it just didn't work. Physiologically, it just wasn't working. And
mentally, I think that was the main thing.
Yeah.
For me was I've been trained as a psychotherapist, and so I'm really, really oriented on mental health. And I just felt like the diet, even though it was to a certain degree really natural the way we were doing it, and we were so connected with our food, and it was really rewarding in a certain way, even though that was the case, there still were just these lingering, you know, really negative thoughts and depression and, you know, just so much fear. And it really would only take about 3 days of eating 100% raw foods to finally start to like lift that veil and be experience this fearlessness again that I knew was a possibility. And so, you know, it got to a point where we both just looked at each other and we're like, this isn't working. Like we're harvesting all these amazing fruits from the trees. And of course you have to cook breadfruit. So we were doing a lot of that. And you have to cook taro because it's poisonous raw. And we were eating that we spent hours a day on the fire cooking. And that was really rewarding in itself too, just to be able to, you know, see what it takes to really cook something up in a really organic way. But we looked at each other and we're like, we can feel better. Like life doesn't have to be this kind of like dark, negative mind state and this bodily kind of, you know, cathartic experience. And I kept saying to Patrick, I was like, I really think there's just something about the raw food diet that, you know, really intrigues me. And of course, when I did it at first, it was high fat. And I still kind of believed in the like, oh, fruit causes candida and to try to stay away from it. But then I would like eat all my gourmet raw food meals and then like binge on a bunch of dates because my body just knew that it needed those sugars then I'd feel bad about it. But once we did research, he was like, no, I think it's the high fruit that's, you know, that's like even more optimal than the raw food gourmet diet that I did before. So when we experienced that, we really went in on that together for the first time. And that was just a whole nother level of, I would say, the happiness factor was like times a million doing it with high fruit, as opposed to minimizing the fruit and doing lots of green juices and all these other things, which are a great complement to it. But the fruit is like, if you want to have a happy life, the fruit is just where it's at. There's just no questioning about it in me anymore.
It's so interesting. Like, I think that people are so disconnected from the reality of like what you try to do with producing all your own food and everything, and processing your food, cooking it. I've sometimes watched little programs of, you know, traditional methods of harvesting certain foods, and the amount of steps involved, the amount of labor that can be involved in preparing things like bread, like is a lot more, I think, than an amount of time is a lot more than what people realize. And people just go to the shop and pick up bread, you know, and it's like for someone else back in the day, it's like an all-day process just to get that kind of started. And like,
Well,
yeah,
I must say that you really come to appreciate it. Like once you get
right.
to meal, like this amazing experience of everything that went into it, and this tremendous sense of like independence and almost power in a way. But then, like we said, the downsides of that are, you know, the health effects and just, you know, everything that could have been more ideal if we had known more about if we'd had more information at that time about health. We could have been putting all that time and energy into things that were more promoting of our health rather than just continuing a traditional method.
And we did get a chance to start over, which was great because we left our homestead where we had been doing different animal husbandry practices and working with animals, and we got a whole new property of 7 acres, and we set aside 6 acres of it for conservation, and then we developed 1 acre of it by hand, where we actually built an entire house, just him and I, and of course with the help of kids, like, you know, babysitting each other. Essentially, they helped with little projects here and there, but we were able to build this entire house almost entirely powered by fruit. And then we planted, like, probably by the time we left, there were thousands of fruit trees on this 1 acre that we created. And so we were able to plant all the bananas and plant all the papayas and produce a lot of our own food, fruitarian, you know, lifestyle permaculture scene. And it was really magnificent. Tons of dragon fruit and lots of exotic kind of Mediterranean crops, because we were on a particular part of the island that was more in that climate zone. And so that was
why did you move to Hawaii? Had you already got interested in eating more fruit, or was it just the weather or something different?
No, so we ended up moving to Hawaii before we were into the raw vegan fruit-based diet. We just went there for other reasons, to volunteer and just to participate in a different climate, really. The winters where we were are pretty severe, and at a certain point we wanted to be spending more time outside year round and able to garden more, because we were still really into gardening, but not exclusively that. It was like Layla said, we were pretty omnivorous, but Hawaii was the opportunity to do that year round. And so we went there, and maybe after 3 or 4 years we came into the raw food fruit-based diet, and then started everything that we had been doing with the land and sort of localized living, sort of transitioned to a fruit focus. And that's where it got just so much more fun and so much more, you know, sustainable, because we actually felt like we could, you know, walk around without getting sick every couple months. Or
we got energy from what we ate, and it was so simple. I mean, there was a lot of harvesting of huge banana racks involved, and I mean, we would probably harvest hundreds of pounds of fruit a week.
Wow.
You know, maybe sometimes going into over 1,000, just in terms of how much, you know, how many different crops we were growing, and how you know, our papayas were like this big.
Okay, wow.
It was just phenomenal.
Do
Really,
you guys,
really.
having your kind of background with homesteading and stuff like that, do you think it's, how possible would it be for someone to be able to live for a whole year, for example, growing their own food in a place like Hawaii on a raw vegan diet? Do you think it's possible for someone to do that?
Just, you're saying just growing their own from their own land?
Yeah, like growing, like, is there a way of doing that, or would you need a lot of land, a lot of trees, or like how much food can you grow, you know?
Yeah, I think
Hawaii.
on Hawaii you could, or in
Definitely.
Florida or other subtropical places. From our experience, it's pretty doable, but it does take that, you know, that preparation time to learn, not only learn how to do this diet in a way that you enjoy, coming from a whole nother upbringing, but also to the land takes time to come to that production stage. So it's at least a couple years where, you know, there's a lot of nice farmers markets most places,
and you might incorporate some, like you could dry some foods and stuff like that, and have a lot of dried fruit in backup, and you could do things like that, I suppose.
In places that that have the seasons, you know, that I think would have to be more of an option. But I don't even know if you would really need to do that in Hawaii, because there could be things growing. I mean, there are even avocados, for example, although like some people don't really do a lot of overt fats when they get to this lifestyle, but there are avocado trees that produce every season of the year. So if you get different varieties, you can be having, you know, different avocados every time of the year, and you can do that with other things too. And maybe you'd need to depend on some other people for more bananas, but it would definitely be available within that region.
Yeah.
But I still think there are some big planning issues that you would need if that was your goal, to eventually have the trees at a fruit producing stage where it's enough food, and if something doesn't go right, or if it's not a wet season, or there's just so many unknowns that it would take, I think, several years to get even close to that point where you'd be growing it on your own land.
Would you attract, I was going to ask, would you attract a lot of animals and things like that? Is there any interesting animals that might show up if you have a lot of fruit in your garden?
Other thing that's kind of interesting to talk about, the pest problem.
Well, yeah, we got to tell you about that. So when we lived this way, kind of like close to the land there, we had so many pests. Even when we were cooking, there were rats. The rats would try to get into cages and look for the bread, and they'd be you name it. What were the other pests?
There were pigs, wild pigs, and deer, kinds of things.
Where were the wild pigs?
In Hawaii?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. They're
pretty ubiquitous in Hawaii, but those, we could fence those out of the orchard, so they weren't really an issue. But the funny thing was, when we transitioned to the raw fruit-based diet, like, so many of the pest problems went away. It's just funny. It was like they were almost there because of what that produced. Crazy. You know, it was wild.
It was literally, and then we would go through these periods where we would like have a cooked meal here or there, and it literally, I don't know if it would just create a certain kind of consciousness that would act from problems, but literally the next day we would have like a rat trying to chew through something or whatever it may be. It was a direct correlation that was just insane. It literally, the raw food, high fruit lifestyle almost eliminated every single problem from our life that we were dealing with land-centric living, with our relationship, with the way we interact with our kids on so many levels. It's phenomenal.
So interesting. This is all, it's really great to have a conversation with some people that have like some really great experience with trying all these different sustainable kind of ways of living. It's amazing. So fun. So, well, let's talk about your pregnancies, and I guess particularly your raw vegan pregnancy, but you also had one before that, I think, as well, you said.
We did. We've had three different childbirths, and all of them were on our own. All of them were in Hawaii. Two of them were in the jungle. The first one, we birthed our son underneath a bamboo tree. The second one, we made a bathtub out of that bamboo tree and gave birth to our little girl in some water. And then the third one, we actually created this lignothermal water heating system where we coiled a pipe hundreds of feet long in a decomposing wood chip pile, and it created hot water, and we called it Hawaii's first hot spring because we kind of like a little spring into the ground, and we gave birth to our third a child in that. And the last two pregnancies and childbirths were fruit based, and for both of those, my water actually didn't even break. The amniotic sac was still intact, and so when both of those daughters came out, they were still in this incredible bubble that just burst as soon as they came into the water. I didn't push at all for those births. They just were literally ejected from my body, and it was so easeful. I didn't have any tearing. I was up that day doing laundry, walking around, just functioning completely optimally.
This is amazing, right? So you're talking about, I didn't know this, but so when a woman's water breaks before pregnancy, this is a sac that's around the baby in the womb. I wasn't aware that that's how it works. And the little baby came out in that sac.
Yeah, it was like, I kept waiting for the water to break because that's just what happens. That's what's supposed to happen, and it shows you that you're in labor. But instead, during my labor, I had, a little bit of an altered state comes when you go into labor. And so that was kind of my key sign was, it almost feels like this really almost like a holy state, like you're in the presence of like this holy, the Dalai Lama or Mother Mary or somebody in front of you that's just like so renowned. And so that was kind of the triggering of I'm in labor. And then, for my second birth, I was doing so well during my labor that I actually was carrying like gallons of water because we didn't have hot water. So we had to fill our birthing tub, the one that we made out of bamboo, with water. And then when I went into labor, we made this huge fire with all of this ironwood that we harvested. And we went out and we would boil a pot of water and then bring it in and dump it into the birthing tub. I by no means thought that I was going to be doing that during my labor, but I felt so good. And Patrick kept being like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm okay." Like I'd have to kind of like take a few moments to just be with myself at certain times, but it would last for a few seconds. And then I'd go back and keep doing it. And it was just phenomenal how good I felt during the labor. And then the actual birthing experience too was, I mean, she literally when she came out of me, I was laughing. Like I laughed her out. Like there was so much joy. And it was totally replaced all of the pain and the fear that I felt with the first one. And I know some people will say like, "Oh, that was just your first birth and that one's always harder." But it's not just that. There was a completely different mentality, mindset, body, everything was so much more restricted, so much slower, so much more clogged up, so much more painful, so much more fear. And I know that it was directly correlated to the diet. And I was doing all the meditation and the mind work and everything, but with our first one. And it wasn't until that was coupled with the diet, with the high fruit diet, that miracles started to happen.
That's unbelievable. I mean, I find this, when you were talking about this on the Fruity Fridays, I couldn't believe it. I've heard stories like this, but to really see it confirmed like that was amazing. And what you're saying is no pain, really. You didn't push. The the waters didn't break, and you kind of recovered from it pretty quickly. And all of these things seem to go against my vision of what childbirth is. It's always like, this is the most painful thing anyone could ever go through and stuff like that. Like, that's what I always hear. And
I would the word pain to intense. It's the most intense experience that I feel like anyone could ever experience. But yeah, the pain factor, the pain is different than intensity. And the pain factor for my first was so omnipresent. And I got to work with that. And that was really beautiful to be able to see like the pain comes and goes and the impermanence of life and all the spirituality of it. But then, you know, to know that that piece doesn't have to exist just even in daily life too, you know, because it starts with the daily life and then it goes into, you know, it accumulates and then it can go into your, you know, your birthing experience or your sporting event or whatever it may be. And it's just this accumulative effect of like, you've been living a pain-free lifestyle. Of course, you're going to have these miraculous experiences when you know, go to express yourself in these different ways.
Yeah. And I would be curious to know, I mean, we've heard it from so many of the other fruit-based advocates, but it seems like every person's body that starts to choose to eat this way, like all the bodily functions, consumption and elimination, like every bodily function is made kind of easier and more enjoyable. I mean, wouldn't you say like even just your daily tasks are pretty remarkably different than they were on your old diet? And so it's almost just been a translation of that to another bodily function that gets just generally more enjoyable. It doesn't mean like that's that way for everybody or necessarily all the time, or like this is some teaching. It's like it tends to get like a lot more enjoyable in every aspect of your bodily function. And it's been amazing, like you say, to see that with the birthing aspect too.
Yeah. What was your experience with the second birth and the third birth? Was it different? Did you have a different experience with it from what you saw?
Yeah, it just totally blew my mind. It's like with the actual moment of birthing, it's like I almost missed it. It's like she gave birth and I was like, did the baby just come out? Because it was just such in harmony with the way moving. It's like nothing ever happened. She's like, oh, here's the baby pops out into the water, and her water never broke, and she never really did the things like you say that are associated with birthing. It was kind of like just this new sensation, and then out comes the baby. I was like, I almost felt like the birth didn't happen. I'm still waiting for it to happen because birth as I knew it never took place there. But my mind was trying to like figure out like this missing piece that never, birth as we know it never happened with that child.
Wow. Wow.
That moment of coming through the opening and then and then the air, like it was just so fluid. It blew my mind. It still does. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and the baby, how big was the baby out of interest?
Totally normal size. I mean, we didn't, with all of our births, we were off grid. We didn't have electricity, and we don't know exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have a scale or a time
but they were all actually, I would say Isaiah was a little bit bigger than both of them, but both the girls, they were not tiny by any means. Like I would guess that they were around 8, just the average. It was not. Yeah,
just pretty straightforward.
It wasn't just the size. Like it wasn't like they were just smaller babies and that's why it was easier. It wasn't that,
No. Well, yeah, but with all of my births as well, they were past the technical due date. So I thought it might even be, a little bit bigger than average, because of that, having, more time in there. But yeah, they weren't small by any means.
Yeah.
It just was like the ease and the opening and everything was so much more, just fluid and loose and just available for an easeful transition.
And I should say for during that time, sort of the 5 months leading to the actual birth, that we were learning a lot. We were learning a lot of the 80-10-10 and, you know, from you guys about how to actually do this and why it works. And it was just so different to everything that we'd been brought up believing that it did take a lot of time to sort of like coach ourselves into, oh, I can just sit down to a meal of fruit and I'm going to be okay. And we were, you know, learning how to do this for that whole period. And we were getting some amazing things happening to our own bodies. But then when this birth event happened like that, it sort of started to confirm it even more. And we just, you know, kept building from there. And I should say, we still went back and forth even after that time because we were still relatively new with it. It's not like we understood all the nuances and, you know, what you do when, you know, there's not a lot of ripe fruit on your counter and how you sort of cope with that in all the different ways. But it gave us enough of a taste to get really curious about this, even though we didn't have as much information as we do now that could, you know, be available to somebody who wants to consider this diet, you know, with all the books that you and others have put out there to really help people learn why this might be beneficial or why they might want to give it a try, even though it's so foreign to a lot of our minds, like, it's so unbelievably strange. I mean, and that's just to say a little bit more here, that's kind of why I feel really excited about this diet so much of the time, is because I was such a disbeliever. I mean, Layla had to like drill this into my head that it was even a possibility, and I never took it. I was like, no.
I would bring up the raw food thing, and then he would always counter it with this article from a Harvard professor about how we've evolved to eat cooked foods.
Or well, just whatever.
So that is interesting. Like, and there are books about that, about the idea that humans evolved on cooked food and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting, but then I hear stories like you guys talking about homesteading, and I listen to these guys and they're like, oh yeah, we were eating cooked food 500,000 years ago, and I'm like, how are they doing that? Like, like I'm sure they probably did to some degree, but I don't know how sophisticated it would have been if they had like the whole system set up, the equipment they would need. Like, yeah, maybe they have fire, maybe there are, but I don't know. Like, I think they would have needed other food for sure, like uncooked food to survive at first. But I don't know. I don't know if they were in the forests with big like pans, boiling water in it. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't sound. I just don't get, like, when they say stuff like that, you're like, how would it have worked? You know, but they do. I mean, there are tribes that do it for sure, but but I don't know if they were doing it that long ago, if they figured it out that long ago. But anyway,
even doing it long ago, it still feels like there's room for improvement, you know, in the human species. And so if we can find ways where we feel healthier and happier and better, then why not evolve to that instead of needing to go back to the past or justify why we're doing something now because we passed.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned things like taro being poisonous, and there's so many foods like that as well that we commonly eat that are poisonous without being cooked, right? But people will say, oh yeah, we're designed to eat whatever beans or these things. And it's like, but there's so many foods like that are poisonous and kill people in nature, you know. And I don't know. It's interesting, but I think there was a lot more fruit. Regardless, there was always a lot more fruit in people's diets than maybe we believe. I think it's one of these things that kind of just isn't even seen as an option. Like in that book, Catching Fire, because he's talking about, well, we couldn't have eaten so much vegetables and we couldn't have done this and that, and he doesn't really talk about fruit that much. You know, he just doesn't even see it as an option. And that's what I think is fascinating, is if you were to look at what was the proportion of fruit in people's diets over history, I think you would realize it was a lot higher than they realize. That's my kind of thought on it.
So, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, since then, the children you've had, how have they been? Are they eating a lot of fruit? Do they like fruit? How's it all going since then? And also, we mentioned breastfeeding as well, because I think I've known mothers who are omnivore mothers, and they worry about breastfeeding or having enough milk, and they usually end up eating or drinking more milk or having more, like that's the solution they think. So maybe you can tell us a bit about all that.
Yeah, I'll let Layla talk a little bit about the feeding aspect, but maybe before that I can just mention how it's been for our kids and how they enjoy it. It's just, that's raising them, that's been their definition of food, is fresh fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds in moderation, and so when it's time to eat, that's just what they eat, and they love it, and it's amazing for them, and they look forward to it. And when they get bored, they can mix things and make it more complicated, or when it's simple and they're in a hurry, then they have it more simple. But that's another one of the things that has sort of confirmed this all for us, even though we're still learning. And I'm not saying that somebody can't be healthy, just eating a vegan diet, or somebody can't be healthy eating a traditional diet, or even a carn. I don't know enough to like say what's not possible, but I do know what our experience has been, and we've never had to take our children to a doctor or to any medical, even holistic medicine. We just haven't had the need, and it's not because we're wanting to be homesteaders or because it's not a religious thing. It's just they haven't had the need to even consider that. It's like they're healthy every day and they have energy, and they're just growing kids, and they're having fun, and they're crazy and sometimes hard to keep up with. But just in terms of like not needing to address all the health issues that we went through as children, and just having the total absence of those complications has just been another one of these light bulbs of like, oh, we're so glad that this is an option now. It doesn't mean it's like the ultimate, or that we won't learn a new, better way of doing it, or even a more nutritious way of having a snack or having a dinner, or on and on. But we do feel pretty grateful that there's just this total absence of all those issues that we had as children, and that even our friends or family continue to have even now. And so we don't want to like impose this, but it's like, oh well, have you tried just feeding your kid fruit, because they kind of like it, and they do great on it, and obviously you have to have enough, and there's this whole new way of orienting yourself and your family towards food, period, in terms of getting enough food and enough caloric density and all those different aspects of the diet and lifestyle. But to answer your question in terms of how kids do on this, it's amazing. They just don't have a lot of problems that other kids do, and they enjoy it. And whenever we go to like a potluck or a community event, I mean, so much of the time the other children are going to be like turning towards the blueberries and watermelon and like trying to put that plate, or like even the really young kids, it's fun to watch somebody else's like infant crawl over, and like, what are they going to go to first? It's like they're not grabbing for the potato salad, they're like grabbing your watermelon and grabbing the other foods. And then a lot of the other people that might have other beliefs about diet and have come to like fear fruit and think it's bad, they'll try to like teach their kid into not eating fruit. And maybe that's what we went through as children, was just this repetitive, that being taken away, or, oh no, you just have one apple for snack and that's what fruit is. But maybe you can share a little bit more on.
Yeah, I could just add to what Patrick said, which is that our two older kids have experienced eating everything, so they know what's available. They know about animal products, they know about these different things, and so there have been periods where we have but that's just been because they've copied what we were doing, which was we'd go back because we didn't quite have this figured out yet. But it's common for us to ask them, do you feel like anything's missing from your diet? Is there anything that you want to be eating that you're not eating right now? Like anything in the world. And we give them the option, and they tell us that they feel so happy with what they're eating. which is so rewarding as a parent. And not only that they feel satisfied, it's not like we're just these strict people that are like, you know, trying to control our kids and all this stuff. It's like they really appreciate not getting sick. They see so many of their friends getting sick and having all these problems, and they say that they're like, no, we really like eating this way. We like feeling good and healthy and happy, and so that's really rewarding. And it's also, you know, really neat to be a mother and to feel like we have just totally sidestepped the whole realm of kids throwing up at night and kids having these tummy aches or having intense fevers, and just feeling how much stress and anxiety that causes, you know, caused our parents and causes any parents in the world, to feel your baby is going through something and you have no idea what it is, and you don't know how to take care of them, essentially, because you just have to go take them to a doctor or to a hospital for them to take care of the kids. And then you just have to place all of your trust in them to do the right thing, which hopefully they will. And it's just a really, you know, hard way to parent, I think. And so we just feel so grateful that we don't have those issues, and that, you know, we know how to take care of them in a way where they're thriving and where they don't feel pain. And even if they do get a little bump or bruise here or there, it heals so quickly that it's almost a miracle before our eyes how quickly something like that will heal. But even that is such an infrequent occurrence as well, because they're so embodied, they're so aware of their bodies, and they're so healthy. And so it's really quite cool. And in regards to the breastfeeding aspect too, with my first, I had so many uncomfortable situations around breastfeeding. You know, I don't want to give too much information, but like one of the biggest things was leaking. Like I could just not control. There was so much milk that, and the baby just wouldn't eat enough of it. It was too much, to the degree where it was causing discomfort for me. I would get mastitis. There would be times when it was just so sore and swollen. And I just thought that that was what breastfeeding was supposed to be like. I didn't know that it could be another way. And it's so ingrained in mothers' heads that you have to eat plenty of fat. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is that you have to eat a lot of fat so that your breast milk is ample and it has everything that the baby needs, and it fattens your baby up quickly and all these different things. But you know, when I followed the 80-10-10 protocol through the pregnancy and right after the childbirth, you know, the first thing I was eating was a cantaloupe and all this fresh cantaloupe juice. And you know, I didn't have any of those problems. And the only times that I would be if I would mess with the ratio and do way too much fat. Even the raw food fat even could cause mastitis and different problems. And so there's a direct correlation between the fat consumption and the discomfort during breastfeeding, which you would think would not exist, because all of these doctors and people are recommending, you know, you have plenty of fat. But and I'm not saying that you don't need any, because I do think that kids require a different diet sometimes even than we do, because they're growing and they're in a different phase in their life. But in terms of just strictly the mother's comfort and peace of mind, which feels like a pretty pivotal thing to focus on in order to have a healthy child and a healthy family, and the clarity that it takes to be able to make the right decisions, you know, it's, I think, a lot less than people recommend and say. So, but no problems breastfeeding the second two. It was just such an enjoyable experience. It was, instead of it being painful and, you know, just such a drag at times, it was like every single time a joy, blissful experience. The hormones would get set off so effortlessly. I would feel happy during and after, and absolutely no pain.
Amazing.
There was still an abundance
Yeah.
Still an abundance of milk, but like not just unregulated chaos. It was like,
I was more in
yeah.
control of it, which
Uh-huh.
was the great part. It's like I knew how to make more milk if I wanted to, just increase the fat a little bit more, but not so much to make problems, or increase the calories a little bit more, and then it's more than enough.
What's
Not uncomfortable.
what's your position on like how long to breastfeed a child? Do you plan on, or have you? Because I've known some women that have breastfed children like quite many years, right? And I've known others that haven't. So, any thoughts on that, or what your plans are with that, or
Well, yeah, it would be interesting to hear other people's experiences in terms of doing it longer. But you say a little bit about that.
I feel, but with our first two, I wanted to breastfeed my son really, really long. He was the firstborn. But then I got pregnant when I was probably a year and a half or so into feeding him. And I just didn't feel, I thought I could feed him while I was pregnant with my second, but I was just getting really strong feelings that I didn't need to do that, and that he'd had enough, and that it was fine to move on. I did kind of have this like romantic vision in my mind of, like the Greek warriors and in Roman times, and to like breastfeed them until they're 4 or something. So they're super strong and healthy. But I felt like he got everything he needed. I felt totally fine with that. And that was the same with my second as well. I stopped feeding her around a year and a half or so. And she was loving fruit. And because we were just replenishing her with so many fruits and vegetable juices and whole fruits, and it didn't really feel like there was anything missing. Like she was just getting stuff.
Did the babies start to lose interest in breastfeeding before you stopped them, or?
No, I think that they might have just gone on forever, to be honest. It was like I had to set the boundary completely. And I feel like I could have gone on too, but I just think that so much of parenthood is a very intuitive process. And when we really trust ourselves and kind of tune in to what is best for us and what we're sensing about different times, then that's the greatest teacher during that journey. So with the third, I definitely think that I fed her a little bit longer than I would have liked to. I think that a year to a year and a half is a good amount of time. I think if you have an optimal diet, I mean, I don't really think that you miss out on anything. And sometimes I think it might be even healthier to get them on fruits sooner than to wait so long and be having them have this, a little bit fattier and protein rich milk than just the pure fruit or vegetables at times. And so, I'm not against if people want to feed them really, really long, but I think it's worked well for us, what we've done.
Yeah, I've known a few people, but I know one lady that her choice was she wanted to wait until the child made the decision, but she didn't have any other children after that. So I think the child kept breastfeeding until like 8 years old or something, but it probably wasn't that regularly by that point. Maybe it was just once in a while, I don't know. But my own mother, her comment on sort of seeing that, she said that she felt that was more for the mother at that point than it was for the child. There was maybe the mother was having a hard time with letting go of that
Absolutely.
thing, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's really fascinating because ironically, neither Layla nor I breastfed at all as children. So we just felt so glad that like we were able to do this at all, because I mean, I don't know the details, but as far as I can tell, many mothers are told by the medical profession that they shouldn't breastfeed, that they should just be giving their babies formula because of their discomfort or physical ailments. They just don't ever have never breastfed at all, which seems like as a human, that's kind of like one of the most fundamental basic rights of any mammal is to like be able to breastfeed. But compared to that, I mean,
it's a mammal thing. Yeah, and the funny thing, So I saw a thing that was in order to digest milk, we create a particular enzyme in our stomach, I think, when we're babies, but that disappears at some point. So I've heard this idea that the baby should naturally start to dislike or not want to have it so much because it becomes uncomfortable. But I don't know how true that is. You know, I just don't know enough about it. But it's really interesting to hear your story.
I definitely didn't experience that with any of our kids, but I think it also could have to do with the mother's diet, you know, like if there's a child that's drinking milk from a mother that's eating, you know, a bunch of meat and milk and eggs, and, you know, they're going to be most likely more colicky and throw up. I mean, that's another thing, is that like we hardly had any regurgitation for our raw food, high fruit, you know, babies, and that was not the case with our first. And so that
What do you mean by regurgitation? Like what from breastfeeding?
cough up, they cough up or they spit up. Like you'll breastfeed them for a while, and then it's just been so long that I can't even remember, but I do remember cleaning up so many throw ups from my son, and also a lot of, you know, just more colic, which is like, you know, they'll start to like fuss, and they'll just be fussy, and you can tell they're uncomfortable because they have these different, you know, stomach things, or they're gassy, or they have different things like that. We didn't have any of that with our fruity birds at all. It's just non-existent.
Fantastic. Have you ever heard the statistic that human breast milk is the lowest in protein of all the animals? Have you ever heard that one?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you have, I think you said you've written a book about all this. Do you want to let us know a bit about what you've written, and maybe where people can find it and follow you, or however you want them to interact with you?
Sure, yeah. We mostly have an account called the Fruit Mama on Instagram, and it has an underscore after each word. So there's 3 underscores, the Fruit Mama. And the booklet that I most recently wrote is Ecstatic Motherhood Guide, and it focuses a lot on it's 15 days of recipes and contemplations, and it focuses a lot on a high fruit, the incorporation of high fruit recipes on whatever diet women are on. It's kind of more of a transitional one. I mean, I think that if I were to do it now, it would be a lot more simplistic, and it'd probably just be like straight up fruit. Like there are different things that are incorporated into this one that are more for somebody that's transitioning, or someone that eats a lot of cooked food but wants to, you know, have more raw food in their diet. And then there's a lot of different meditations and inquiry with each recipe as well. And that's a by donation or a free booklet, you know, depending on if people want to give or not. And I ask that people just email me at laylaverbance@gmail.com, and I can send that over. And then we have a book that we pretty much wrote together about our first pregnancy. Obviously we were doing the homesteading thing. We weren't vegan at that point, so it's not necessarily along that theme as much as just kind of breaking through self-imposed limitations, working with different fears, and then just living this really adventurous life in the jungle while we, you know, went about growing our baby and our food and giving birth and all that. So that is available on Amazon. It's called Sunlight for a Rainbow. And I also am happy to send that for free or by donation to people if they don't want to buy it on Amazon. So
yeah, that's more of just a chronicle of the pregnancy itself. Like Layla said, we weren't even aware of the raw vegan path at that time. So that's, you know, not something that we're even deliberately putting out there, as much as it is just we were able to you know, give birth together, and sort of more of the romantic piece of just living a life or meeting your beloved or whatever it might be.
Nice.
Yeah.
So moving on from that, like what's your lifestyle like at the moment? I guess you're so still in Hawaii, and what would be a typical day for you? Lifestyle, diet, all the rest of it. How does it go for your family?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Ronnie. We're actually in the middle of taking a break from Hawaii. We decided to head off island last year, and so we've been in the Southwest for about half a year now, and just enjoying a change of scene and sort of waiting to see what our next chapter is going to be. But in terms of the daily life, we're just loving just total commitment to the 80-10-10 lifestyle. Essentially, we started, like Layla said, it took us a while to transition and to learn, just because these concepts were so foreign to where we were coming from. But once we finally did sort of make that commitment, or I don't know if it was a commitment as much of just a correlation between every time we'd go back, an undesirable effect. Every time we have a cooked meal at night, we tried, the raw till 4, but every single time we'd get, even if it was just heat in the body or a little bit of achiness, it was just still like, why would I want that if I've tasted something that's more optimal? And at a certain point, we just stopped bouncing back and forth. We just hit the commitment, and it's been like amazing in terms of not just having those relapses. But to answer your question more about a typical day, that's kind of the fun part, where we just sort of sense into what we want to be doing that day. And usually the kids will wake up and eat usually a bunch of oranges or some melon first thing, because they tend to like to do that. And then Layla and I sometimes it's pretty much just the 80-10-10. I mean, if you look at like what Doug Graham's doing, or if you look at, what you guys are doing, you have a big mono meal of what you feel like, and maybe nibble some vegetables. Layla and I typically don't do a lot of veggies during the day. We'll wait till salad at night, but sometimes kids will want a zucchini or a bunch of celery, or they'll grab lettuce in the garden, and they'll eat pretty much just unrestricted, just an unrestricted diet of when they get hungry, they'll come and ask for fruits. And we try to have an abundance of different kinds, mangoes and pears and peaches and guavas and melons and grapes, and just have a lot of stuff that's ready and available for them. And they'll eat it, and then they'll go run off, and then we just repeat that as many times throughout the day until they
Brilliant.
Usually to kind of integrate more into our society or make it more fun for them too. Layla will do these not complicated, but more complex meals, or make like dip for the kids, or a salad or fake bread that's basically just dehydrated zucchini, or the fun things. Like, we can still, if we feel like we're bored or the kids are bored, we can create and make lasagna, whatever you want. But the foundation is there. It's just like, if you're hungry, look at all this amazing fruit, eat it, have fun, and go on with your day.
I mean, we get like an embarrassing amount of food at the stores when we go, because we're used to growing, this is a little break, as Patrick might have told you, from our land on Hawaii, where we grow more, I would say more than 50% of what I would feed the kids. And so then we would only have to get the other 50% from the farmers markets and the stores. And now we're relying almost entirely on that, with just a few little gardens here and there and wild foods that we can find. And so we go to the store and people are like, well, do you have a smoothie shop, or what's going on? They don't believe that this is for our family. And when we tell them that, they're like, oh, how long is this going to last you? And we're like, a week, and they can't believe it, because we just get so much, and we're fortunate that we can do that. But we also definitely feel in our hearts that we always are working towards getting to a point where we can grow the majority of our food, mostly just because we love growing fruit trees, and it's just tastes so much better to grow things on your own, and we're kind of food snobs in that sense. But,
just because it's fun. I mean, you can grow all the rare stuff that's not in stores, and just add that much more variety to your daily menu, but and just because it's fun, that's part of the lifestyle, is getting into the special order durian or whatever it might be, because you're not paying doctor's bills, you're not paying for cosmetic products, you're not paying for all these other things that are associated with that lifestyle. And it's not like we don't feel like we're giving something up doing this. We feel like we just have as much, if not more, room for expression and culinary enjoyment and all the things that we used to have. It just doesn't slap us back.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. It's been so fun to speak to you both, and I encourage everyone to go and follow the Fruit Mama on Instagram. And Patrick, do you have a place? Do you want to be followed, or what? Or do you want to stay secret?
People can if they want. I'm not really active on the social media platforms right now. I do have an account. It's called Durian Magic.
Right.
It's just a antique, silly thing. I don't even have that many. It's just more if it's a place for me to do that if or when I feel like it. But
awesome.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. Layla's email, and we love sharing it for people that can benefit from this message and are excited to be part of the community. So big thank you.
What was the email again? One last time.
Actually, the email that I'll give that might be better would be Native Radiance. That's native, NATIVE, and then radiance, RADIANCE @gmail.com. That's probably the best one, where we both can check that and get back to anyone who ever wants to get in touch. So
cool. Thank you very much. Well, thanks everyone for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Please give us feedback and share this with other people. Share this with someone that this message is going to be really important for some people, I think. So please share it, and give us a rating or comment, whatever you can do to support the podcast. We appreciate that. And go to fruitfest.co.uk to subscribe and learn more from us, and maybe you can join our Fruity Fridays as well on Fridays. And if you want to learn about the festival, go to fruitfest.co.uk/registration. And we thank you all again for listening and watching. Guys, what would be your sort of final message for the moment?
Yeah, I'd like to just say a big thank you to you, Ronnie, and to all the others who are spreading this message, because we know from our own experience that, had somebody not put out that hand and made this known as an option to us, we would have probably just continued in ways that were really uncomfortable. And so we just want to express our gratitude for those of you that are sharing this message or helping people understand why and how this can be enjoyable for a lot of people. We have a big thank you for that, and
awesome
for the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you very much.
And with that gratitude, I would just really just support people in getting quiet and really getting still and being able to ask who they want to be and what they want their life to look like and what they want to feel like, and then to just trust that guidance and to just let it happen, and to know that Patrick and I are supporting anyone who does that from wherever we are in the world, and that you're not alone, and that there's a whole tribe of people here that all just want, the best for everyone. So
thank you very much, guys. Thank you everyone for watching and for listening, and we'll see you in another episode of the Love Fruit podcast.